Okay, with Nicholas Kusmich, Unbecoming is the feature film, played at the Documentary Film Festival. This is an interesting film. I usually kind of come up with a synopsis before the podcast starts,
Yeah.
but I'm going to throw that to you. Tell us what this film's about.
Well, I mean, we being my wife and I had literally like built this successful marketing business over 2 decades of time. And we were plagued with this question in the back of our head, like, is this all life is? And that knock got louder and louder over time. And it got to the point where we said, well, we want to travel the world and we want to take an Emmy award-winning film crew with us to ask the difficult questions from all the people out there as to like, is this all life is? And so what we did was we took two people in our lives that came to us, took them through an experience while at the same time traveling and living in monasteries and Buddhist temples and all sorts of places, as well as traveling to some of the leading research facilities in the world to ask the question, is life really about becoming more, or is it about unbecoming all the things that you are not? And is that where and how we find fulfillment? So that was kind of like the premise on how this all happened.
That's a trippy question right
It
there.
is
That's
indeed.
why I wanted you to describe it. Yeah, because there's a lot. I just gave me a little bit of a headache, even you even describing that right now. So
Yeah, well, that's it. I think it's like what we found fascinating was some of the deeper questions in life, as like why are we here and what does it matter, are not new questions. They've been asked since the beginning of time from contemplative traditions. And now what's interesting is like modern neuroscience is catching up to that and saying, well, what's the brain saying and how are we evaluating all this? And so we just found ourselves stuck in this perfect storm of asking the questions and being surrounded by some very intelligent people and just saying like what actually does it mean to live. And the film title obviously is Unbecoming because our basic premise is we've been fed the belief that life is about becoming more, becoming better, faster, smarter, more successful, whatever we want to put to it. And maybe that's a perpetual trap that doesn't have an ending. And what if it's just like undoing all the things in our life that have been adding to us and finding out who we really are?
So there's a couple of things. One, it's like you're looking at like the level of that because humans evolved, right, as a species. So we're able to ask these questions. Perhaps some animals, some other animals are way smarter than us, and maybe they're asking the same things in their own ways, right?
Sure,
I don't know if you
sure.
thought of that, but also
Yeah.
too, it seems like you kind of not mastered, but you succeeded the capitalistic pursuit. You and your wife, you describe it, you guys mastered it, you guys made a fortune, and I'm just saying that you, but basically, so now you're able to go to that extra level and go out and ask these questions because you have a certain financial and kind of freedom, like of time to do
Right.
these to do this film, I guess too, right?
Yeah, well, so there's two interesting things you said there that I think are like worth considering. My whole life, from ever since I was a kid, and I put the fancy cars on the wall and all these things that I wanted to accomplish in my life. My whole life was driven with if I can just achieve X, Y, and Z, I'll be happy. And so I went at that full force, my wife and I, and we achieved all the things. We had the beautiful house by the lake, we had the boat, we had the car, we had everything. We had the respect of our community. I had a social media following that was envied by many. And to be frank, I didn't feel any better. And so, Jim Carrey has this old saying. He goes, I wish and hope that everybody becomes rich and successful because then they will realize that the
Yeah.
fulfillment is not in those things. And I was just like a byproduct of the Jim Carrey quote. It's like I did these things and yet I didn't. And so we were able then to take the success, and I put that in quotes because different people define success different ways, but we were able to take some of this material success and say, well, clearly this wasn't the path. Are there other paths? And we were able to like rework some of that to go after things that felt better in our soul and leave a greater impact and try to find those answers in different ways than we were previously pursuing.
Because a lot of people in your position, they go do another challenge. Either they get into
Sure.
politics, or they're for instance, like they do some charity work. You know what I mean? Like they go,
Yeah.
they move on to another capitalistic challenge, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was a combination for us. So like my background history as well was I was a pastor for 14 years before I got into business. And so I always like had this sense of like asking some of the deeper questions. And I remember as a pastor at 19 years old having to perform my first funeral. And that wasn't a fun feeling for a 19-year-old kid to do. I also got to do many weddings and see the highs of people's lives. And so I was like monitoring my own ebbs and flows. And the thing that stuck with me ultimately was, why, despite everything that we're pursuing, do we still live every single day with this little hint of suffering in the back of our mind? Like, why do we do that? Why do we go through life with anxieties and fears and all this kind of stuff? And so the challenge that was posed to me was, again, rather than going into politics or trying something new or
Yeah.
try to become a professional athlete or something that I'm totally not equipped to do, was like, hey, I have the time now and the resources to like consider this. And the question started by trying to answer it for me and my family and my wife, which then led to this bigger pursuit of like, maybe these questions can be beneficial to other considerations and other people asking as well.
Yeah, no. So it's a little bit of it's a spiritual charity film in many ways, right?
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
you put
yeah.
money into it, right? So people are watching it and they're taking in the experience. And but at the same time, like we have the freedom. I'm putting myself in the same category where we can ask these questions because we were brought up in a certain in the world that we're both Canadian. We're brought up in a good country.
Right.
We basically worked hard, whatever, and so we're able to ask questions. Some people are just still in survival mode, right? So
It's
they can't
true.
even get beyond just kind of like living moment by moment to survive, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great valid point. I mean, there are different cycles, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's first world problems and there's like non-first
Yeah,
world problems, if we want to
sure,
call
yeah,
it that. But at the end of the day, I feel like, and we call it an inner knock in the film, like there's this deep underlying question that is often being prompted to us in various life situations. Maybe, we're talking about films here. I remember sitting at the end of like a good Christopher Nolan film and like I couldn't get out of my seat right away. Like there was just some kind of like movement happening within me that was visceral. Like, hey, Nick, like, is there more to life than what you know? And sometimes that's at a wedding, that's at a funeral, that's at a just sitting watching a sunset. No matter what like people's life status is, I think it's safe to say that there is this underlying hum, I like to call it, that's like beckoning us or calling us on a certain level to just ask deeper questions. Now, depending on our life circumstance, some of us have more availability to like
yeah,
sit with that question and then whatnot. But I do feel like it is a natural human condition that if we're quiet enough in between our thoughts to be faced with those questions and then just being given the opportunity to do something with them if we can or not.
yeah. Basically what I'm trying to say is that good on you because you could have just sat there and like smoked your cigars and like, which a lot of people do, right? And you
Sure.
brought up Jim Carrey, who's another Canadian, and
Right.
it's like, but there's depth to that, him saying
Mm.
that, right? Like
Well, I
there's
appreciate that.
no, because he's thinking beyond. Like I know he's a painter and he's kind of like introspective. Like, come on, not everybody's like that. That's what I'm
Sure.
saying. Good on you, right? So
I appreciate it
yeah,
for sure.
because some people just want the other car and they want the other business and they want to keep adding to their legacy, I guess, right?
Right, 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 right. Yeah.
So I'm assuming your wife is on the same page as you.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a bit of a wild journey because we were at different phases in different places in our life. And I think like a relational partnership is an interesting dynamic,
Yeah,
obviously. And like, are you walking this path together? But the short answer is, yeah, life unfolded in very interesting ways for us, but it took us down the same path, although we walked it slightly differently. And I mean, I know it sounds bold, but I'm not a filmmaker by trade. Obviously, I ran a business and this is how I live my life. I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that we would have made a film of all things. But in that process, we just noticed life unfolding and this kind of came across our path. And I love the idea or the art of storytelling. And I think film is the greatest way to do that. And just like reading a good book or having a certain experience, I think if you can make a film that is viscerally engaging and can cause people to ask some deeper questions. It just ended up being a very unique medium that we both kind of jumped 2 feet into.
okay, so let's talk about the diving into this world then, because
Okay.
you put yourself in your film, put your wife's in the film as well.
Yeah.
What was the
Yeah.
game plan? Like, did you have like a treatment of what you wanted to do? Like, what's the first step of like of this progress? Now your
Well,
distribution. I'm sure you're looking to sell it or put it somewhere. So what's the first step of this process?
Well, so yeah, it was a wild experience because again, as I mentioned, I don't come from this background. I know nothing about films. I don't know how this process works or whatever. I ran a marketing agency, and what actually happened was an Emmy award-winning filmmaker saw our marketing work and actually approached us to help us with their marketing. And as
Okay.
we started to help them with their marketing, they kept hearing about this other stuff that we were passionate about. And when I say the other stuff, call it personal development, call it spirituality, call it asking the deeper questions in life. And we work with a very particular molecule, for example, that helps facilitate certain experiences that gets people to ask these questions. But they just started hearing us talk about this. And then they came to us and said, well, have you ever thought about making a film about this work that you do? Because it seems like you're very passionate about it and it's very important to you. And I said, hell no. Films sound like they cost way too much money, take way too much time. Like, no thanks. But one thing led to another, and here we were. And so there was really no plan at the beginning except following the lead of the film, the production company. And we took so many different paths around this. And here's one thing I learned about filmmaking is you have a gazillion gigabytes of footage and you use maybe 2% of it at the end of
Yeah.
the day. And it's this like great jigsaw puzzle thing. But we wanted to ask a question. We wanted to have a narrative story arc for a documentary. I feel like that's a little bit rare. Most people will just sit with experts sitting in front of a camera and asking them a bunch of questions. We wanted to have a bit of a story arc with it and tell a story. And the next thing we realized is we're traveling around the world, meeting with some of the leading neuroscientists in the world, with the leading best-selling authors of consciousness. We met with a yogi from Delhi and lived in a monastery and all
Mhm.
sorts of things in between. And so we're at this point now where, I mean, to be frank, I don't even know what the next steps are. We have this film in our hands. We've submitted it to festivals and we're trying to get distribution and like, will a tier one distributor take it and screen it on their platform? I don't know. Can we sell the film or do we just use it as a way to get this message out to the world?
Yeah.
These are all things that I'm actually in real time navigating with the various conversations we're having with
Well,
people.
you are a marketer, and so you know social media probably better than you're maybe in the top 100 of knowing understanding social media.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
give you that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the self distribution is it could be a way to go, right? So,
Well, I love that you bring that up, and it's good hearing it from your eyes too, because like that is the world we know, and so it's
yeah,
very easy for us to use our marketing chops to get this film out to the world. The
yeah,
part I don't know, and I'm having these conversations like, oh, like there's a festival route, and then you get the sales agents to come to the festivals and try to sell it to tier one platforms, and they own it exclusively and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't know that world, but I do know this world. And unless someone can convince me that the traditional means of film distribution
yeah.
might be a better play, I think you're right. We're gonna go balls to the wall and let the world know about it through advertising and see where it goes from
Yeah, and
there.
you could probably you'll make money because well we just had Kristen Stewart just talked about that at Cons, right? She's like my next movie is I'm gonna put it on YouTube, right?
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, which is super
which
fascinating. Like,
may angered a lot of people, right? So
but is that the time that we live in now where like YouTube is a real distribution
it
streaming
is, yeah,
platform for people who are making full-length movies? And
yeah.
if that's the case, I'm excited. I feel like I made the film at the right time because I know that world and I know how to drive eyeballs to that world. And so, that just may be the confirmation that that's the way we go.
I'm curious about YouTube. This is a quick segue before I go back to your film, but YouTube is like soon as someone watches the film for 5 seconds, that counts as a view, right? So you look at your YouTube videos, it's like sometimes it goes and it goes. It's like people's attention span on YouTube.
Right.
I'm curious about the hour and a half, right? So
Uh, as am I, but I did notice like there's a lot of documentaries that just came out around AI, right? And
yeah,
there's a lot of big ones here. And a lot of people are now using YouTube as a distribution platform. And I got to admit it that I've watched full length films on YouTube now.
yeah.
And with Mr. Beast and what he's doing and longer form content now, I didn't do it in one sitting. I did it over three sittings.
That's the point, right? It's
Yeah.
like are you going to go back to that film after the first 20 minutes, right? So
Yes,
yeah,
yes, and that is a question that we'll have to watch the analytics. But
yeah,
I do think that the average person is now being trained that YouTube is a legitimate longer form content streamer, and they're getting used to Yeah, I know people now who like cancel their Netflix accounts and just watch everything on YouTube. So it's an interesting place that we live in right now.
Yeah, everybody's watching their podcast on YouTube. It's like it went like this. It's
Right.
crazy. It's
Right.
amazing, right? So
Yeah.
okay, so tell me about like bringing your team on, the director, like kind of starting this film. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so like I said, we approached this having zero knowledge of
Yeah.
what this meant. Now, fortunately, we built this great relationship with the director who ends up owning a film production company. And
Well,
I think we
Patrick,
just
right? Patrick
Patrick,
Moore.
correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
Patrick Morrow, another Canadian, by the way.
yeah.
And his story is pretty awesome. Like we didn't even know it at the time, but 20 years ago, he was in Toronto with a business that made wedding films. And
Okay.
remember, if you earlier in this conversation, I said I was a pastor.
Yeah.
And I performed weddings, and little did we know that we actually crossed paths
That's
in
amazing.
Toronto 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was performing weddings, and he was shooting the weddings.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another where they really made the same day edit very popular back in the day. And it ended up blowing up, and he ended up doing commercials for NFL and all sorts of things, ended up winning a few Emmy Awards. But we just seemed to have this great connection. And I think the other thing was, and what I love about them, they're not just filmmakers and storytellers. They're like, if we're going to engage in this, we need to fully engage with it. And so just for the record, like one of the things that my wife and I do, which is part of the film, is facilitate psychedelic therapeutic experiences. And at first, the film crew was just like watching and seeing what we do with this. And then at one point, they're like, you know what? If we're going to film this and tell this story, we've got to have the experience themselves. And so they dive 2 feet in. And the
Okay.
moment they dove 2 feet in and had experiences with us, and they just said, we're going to do this properly, everything changed. Because now they were invested from a perspective of like, oh, we know what this work does, and we know the questions to ask, and we know where we need to direct it. And so it ended up being a pretty phenomenal collaborative experience because of that, where they took lead because they know how to storytell and film, and I didn't. But
Yeah.
I knew kind of what questions needed to be asked and where we needed to go with it, and it ended up being a beautiful collaboration.
So did you always want to put you and your wife in the film?
Not originally. No, I like the last thing I wanted was this to be about me and like putting my face in there
Yeah.
and whatnot. I think they did a good job of like not making it fully about us and focusing on the other people. But they were saying, look, if you want to be true to the story, like your voice needs to be heard in this as
Yeah.
well. And so they brought us in and they had us had some very interesting conversations and experiences that they caught on camera, which was beautiful. And so I got, one thing I think it's worth saying for anybody who might be watching who's like, should I make a film or whatnot? I actually at one point turned to my director and I said, look, if this film never goes live, and not that I wanted this to happen, but I said, if this film never went live, all the time, energy, money, and resources that we put into it was worth it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, and I say this one bit in the end of the film in one of the interviews, it's like who would have thought that when we were making a film about transformation and unbecoming, that the ones who would experience the greatest transformation and unbecoming would be myself and my wife. And so this ended up being actually a very transformational therapeutic experience for us, much like I hear that if you write a book, the writing of the book is more for yourself than for your audience.
Yeah.
This was very much that experience for us.
So, I got to ask, what is the? I'm sorry if I'm going to bungle the words. Transfer. What did you describe it? The meditation. What kind of meditation is it?
Like the therapeutic psychedelic.
Psychedelic meditation. What is that like? Because that's going to pop when you say as soon as you say that. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah. So here's the thing. We were studying. Well, I was fascinated by studying the human mind and like why
Yeah.
does it do what it do and think about what it does. And part of that journey back in the day had me go down the path of understanding therapeutic psychedelics, which means not recreational. You're not going to some party and taking some drugs.
Yeah.
This is sitting with a clinical therapist who uses psychedelics to open up and have some conversations about what might be buried underneath. And these experiences radically changed my wife and I's life. And as a result, we went down that path to explore the phenomenon of what does a psychedelic actually do to the brain. I'm not talking about a spiritual experience. I'm not talking about a ceremonial experience. I'm talking about neurologically what it does. And we found some very interesting conclusions. And so I don't think psychedelics are the only tool. Like we sat with a Buddhist Lama in a monastery in Nepal, and they do 20 years of meditation to get to certain places on understanding the mind. We just found that this psychedelic tool often takes 20 years and turns it into 20 minutes and gives you a tool to be able to work with. And so that is a one part of the film because we explore how this effect actually affects
I'm sorry.
people's.
I'm just thinking the monk right now. He's like, why didn't you someone tell me that before? I just wasted 20 years of my life.
Well, so there is a scene in the movie where I
Yeah.
actually have a quote unquote debate with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's a debate is not how we think about a debate. In Buddhist culture, a debate is like
Ideological differences, I guess.
exactly. And to be frank, and he doesn't know this. Well, I mean, he does, obviously. When we went there, our original intention was to say, like, you've been studying this and meditating for 20 years. You're the reincarnate of a previous Lama. Like, I don't know how that all works. And our original plan was to say, like, look, we work with this molecule called 5-MeO. Why don't you take it with us and tell us your experience and how does it relate to your deep meditation? Because there's already clinical trials of taking monks and putting them on a psychedelic and seeing how that affects their regular practice. And originally he said maybe, and then he said no, it's against my belief system. But part of our exploration here was we know it's not the only tool. We know that there's many contemplative traditions that reach certain states of peace and fulfillment other ways. I just wanted to know how this compared to others. And that was part of the exploration of the film as well, where we just tell people, look, there's not one way to get there, but there is such a thing as peace and fulfillment and contentment. There's many paths to get there. And we want to present to you two fundamental beliefs. One, that you can all get there, and two, that there's multiple tools to get there. And so why don't you just explore what those could be for you?
Gotcha. And then, so how long was this film from like the idea bringing Patrick on and then to the end? Like, how long did it take?
I'd say between 18 months and 2 years from the
Okay.
idea and then the travel and then the editing and the post editing and working it all is about 2 years.
And were you part of the editing experience? Like, were you like, no?
Not from a feedback mechanism, yes, because obviously they put some edits together
Yeah.
and they send it back and we've given some feedbacks. But I don't naturally understand like story arcs and where we can go with it. I mean, I remember seeing the first cut of the film and being like, what about the 90% of footage where that's not in here? Like again, I didn't understand film.
Yeah.
And Patrick said something to me that I keep to me to this day. And he says, Nick, art is never finished, it's only abandoned.
Yeah. It
And I was
does.
like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
get it. And so like even when I watched the final cut of the film and I was like, I approved it, in the back of my mind, there's still that little bit of, oh man, there's so much good stuff that we like didn't put in there.
Mhm.
But you realize like there's got to be an end at some point and you got to figure out how to get there. And I'm happy with the final
Well, yeah,
result.
because it's about threading the film, meaning that like if you have to, it has to be a story arc, right?
Right,
So meaning that if
exactly.
you add the footage that you like, it has nothing to do with the theme of your film, then it kind of breaks up, and then you got to start somewhere new, right? So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So I mean, I have a whole new level of respect
yeah.
for directors, filmmakers, producers, editors, like the whole gambit of it all, because like to thread a story with again gigabytes of data and footage and trying to find the through line is
Mhm.
truly an art and a science.
Especially a film like this, because there's not a script. Usually, you have a script as a
Right,
blueprint, right? And that's
right.
what I was asking at the beginning. It's like basically, it seemed like you guys did a lot of like they call it cinema verite. I'm sure you've been told that, where like you're just kind of shooting stuff and then like kind of figuring it out in the editing room like later on, right?
That's
So
that's exactly what it was. Like there were some ideas around
yeah,
some like
yeah,
concepts, but it ended. I remember seeing a board in the studio
yeah,
and it looked like a jigsaw puzzle. There's like we've got all these
yeah,
scenes. Where's the through line of the story and how do we piece it together? So it was a fascinating experience from that perspective.
yeah. Tough film. These are tough films to make. So Patrick helped out with the editing, and then they brought in some people to kind of like. I'm assuming that's how it worked.
Yeah, so he's a director. Also, he has
Yeah.
an editing background because of his
Okay.
history, of course. But they have a full production team that piece together the storyline, the producers, the editors, the finishers, the music. Like again, all stuff I don't fully understand. But it was all managed and concierged by them. Yes.
But it seems like this is a big education for you.
In so many different ways.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, personally, the whole process was transformative, as I mentioned. And then just learning the dynamics of like how to story tell and what matters. And I'm invested, right? It's my story and it's my dollars being spent here. So like there was that learnings. And then now I'm as we're talking here, it's also the learnings of what to do with it now that I have this in my hands. Like how do we distribute it? So it was a truly a fast track school of understanding filmmaking, storytelling, distribution, producing, like all of it in one short, two-year period.
Wow. Are you going to make another film, you think?
That's the question. You never say never, but it's like yeah, there was so much time, effort, and energy spent on this. Um, and I'm so happy with the final product that like half of me is like, let's do it again. The other
Yeah.
half of me is like, never, never again. So I'll say never, but we're gonna ride the wave of this one as long as we can. And if interesting opportunities avail themselves to us, I do. Here's what I do know that I absolutely love the medium of film as a storyteller.
Hmm.
Like as an advertiser back in the day, we tried to use words or short form videos and different ways to tell stories.
Yeah.
I am fully convinced now that film is one of the most effective long form ways to tell a story and to engage an audience. And so for that, um, depending on the world of AI and where all this goes, I still think it's a very effective means to tell a story and educate someone and get visceral buy-in from someone on a particular topic matter.
But what are you doing next? Like, what's next for you?
That's the $1 million question, right? We've sunsetted our marketing business, for better or for worse. And who knows if this film is well received out in the public, this kind of takes off some of the work we do in the personal development slash facilitation world, and maybe that's it. We've had approaches now from some of the early people who saw the film asking me if I'm interested in writing a manuscript and kind of like writing a book on some of the processes behind the film. Like the film is a great story, but now people are looking for like, how did you come to these conclusions? And so maybe I write a book, maybe I expand
Have you
that.
written a book about like marketing and like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, back in the days, in old 2018 is when I wrote a book, and it was one of those things, same thing, where they're like, "Would you ever write a book again?" And my answer was absolutely not. I don't want to write another book. That was treacherous. But here we are being approached by people to say, like, "Do you want to write a book in this completely different field?" Right? My 20 years of history was in marketing, and now we're moving into whatever you want to call it, modern neuroscience mixed with contemplative traditions, and trying to ask deeper questions in life. So who knows where it's all going to go at
So
this
I
point.
just saw your book. It's on. It's still the ultimate guide to using Facebook advertising.
That's
It's
right.
on.
Give.
Still on
Yes.
Amazon. Got good ratings, right? So,
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It was okay. It was
but is it
28.
thing? Can I wanted to ask you about this because but has things changed? Like, is Facebook is it different now? Like, is it? I know it's a kind of a vague question, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
Like, is everything different from like
I think
when
social
you wrote
media
it?
has definitely changed
Yes.
since the book was being written. I think
Yeah.
I think there's two ways to look at it, right? There's deep human psychology. It's why people take actions, and those don't change, right? We are all moved to take actions for the same X amount of reasons. But the platforms are ever evolving, right? Like, who would have thought that the main way that people consume content are through like 15 to 30-second reels? Like that wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
But now people are doom scrolling, and that's just how they kind of live. And so the platforms have changed, yes. Human psychology, not so much. So I guess it's the same with storytelling as it is in marketing, because for me, marketing was nothing more than storytelling, anyways.
Yeah.
It's how do you use story to allow someone to think about the decisions they're making and then take more appropriate decisions that are for their betterment.
So, but you say you like in the future, like where you think that people are going to still be doing social media, like say 50 years from now? Like
Oh,
this was like a highway that was built and it's still going to be used.
well, yeah. Oh, gosh, it's like if
Yeah,
you asked me that question like 10 years ago, I'd be like
yeah,
100% absolutely. But
yeah.
now with like the speed of what's happening with large language models and AI and stuff like that, like, and I say this tongue in cheek, but I was like, are humans going to exist in the same way that we do now? Like,
Yeah.
the with the advent of it. So I think social media points to the human condition. We love it. There's a dopamine fix there. We're longing for connection,
Yeah,
but
it's
it's
an
also
addiction. It's
it's
an
an
addiction.
100%. It
Yeah,
is the same triggers in the brain that activate on someone who's addicted to heroin or cocaine
yeah,
are the exact same triggers in the neurochemicals that are going off when someone is doom scrolling on social media. So that element is true. There's a human who is desiring connections and fixes and fulfillment and all these things. How they are fulfilled, will it be a social media feed 50 years from now? I'm not sure, but I
yeah.
think it'll be the evolution of social media, whatever that ends up being in 5 to 10 years from now.
Well, usually it's like if you look at all this is my take. If you look at all the, because you know probably far more than I do, probably, but if you look at all the great inventions of all time, it's like it's yin and yang. It's like it goes one extreme to the other, right? Like so, basically, it seems like the more powerful AI becomes, the more powerful the individual and the theater and like the individual conversation and the nuance of those people, right? Because everybody's
Yeah.
going to be countering that, right?
Well,
So
from what I've been reading lately, like especially post COVID, but with like the advent of AI and all this kind of stuff, people are now like longing for more personal in-person experiences, right?
yeah,
Because there's something like people will go to events where they usually don't want to go to events or go to screenings or film festivals because like there's that human to human
certain
connection.
generation, yeah. There's
Yeah.
that. There's a 18 to 30 generation that's not doing that. But go ahead, yeah,
Yeah, which is on the actually the complete opposite side of things. I
yeah,
read this thing the other day where like young men don't even know how to flirt anymore
yeah,
because they don't have actual human interactions with people.
yeah.
Um, but B, because of the place we live in now, whereas back in the day you could go to a club or a bar and
They don't
approach a
go there.
woman and ask a question and try to strike up a conversation, but no, now because it's always being recorded. And if you fail, that might be posted on social and your entire life is jeopardized. Like people are afraid to have human to human interactions. And so,
Well,
God,
there's
yeah,
no practice. It's like that could be a factor in what you just described, but I think it's practice. The more you practice, and you get a little inebriated, go to clubs back in my day, and then
yeah, yeah,
and then you pick up the you figure out how to do it, right?
yes,
So
yeah. But now they're so afraid of that. I think the other interesting thing in light of even the film is, Elon Musk talks about how there'll be universal high income, right? That AI will get to the point where people don't need to worry about
yeah,
money. Now, if our entire identities are built around what we do. Like literally, we wake up in the morning, we go to work, we do our jobs
mhm,
because we need to earn money to live our lives. If everybody has unlimited amounts of money and they don't need to work anymore. Now, I don't know if that's where we're going, but that's the vision for some of these AI guys.
sure.
Um, then what? Right? Like, then we are truly faced with some deep existential questions of like, if I don't have to earn income anymore and my identity is not wrapped up in what I do, and every day is like a Sunday afternoon, I think there's going to be people asking some really deep questions. And we as a society, as a human race, have to figure out like how to approach life that way. And
Well, it's socialism, right? Meaning that, but then there's that personality that, and I probably have that personality where like I'm just going to go and do it. I don't care
yeah,
about money.
anyways,
Money is not my motivating factor
yes,
to go to
right,
work, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
So then there's certain personalities will like that will counter that, right? So, but
yeah,
listen, if you can eliminate like homelessness, you can eliminate
right.
starvation, you can eliminate like abuse, then that's probably a good thing, right? For
Yes.
like this madness of this thing that we created, right? So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
I
good.
think that
Listen, all the tech people, they've always had this idealistic approach to things, right? But it's never really worked out.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
think about think about the internet, right? Like they never really worked out how they described it, right? So
And that's why it's like the future truly is now more than ever. And I think it's always been like this anyways,
yeah,
but now more than ever, it's a big ass question mark. It's like we don't know which direction this is all going to go. So
yeah.
it's a fun time to be alive, that's for sure.
It's usually it's like I said, to go back. It's like one like the internet. One, it's so amazing, but then it's fucking destruct. Part of my French,
No, yeah.
destructive to so many souls, right? So
Yes.
like, and that's
Yes.
what I think about any invention. Any invention in the history of mankind has been like that. So their
Agreed.
idealistic approach to things is like history has shown that that doesn't really work out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But but then that said, they're way smarter than I am. So what do I know, right? So
Well, the writing in the history, obviously. And
Yeah,
so, my hope, I sometimes you scroll through social and you have these conversations, and on the one hand, you're like, oh man, we're fucked. Like life is going to be tough. Like, look at what's happening in the world. And on the other hand, you're just reminded that there's still good in the world and there's
yeah,
people who want to do good things. And so I don't know if that'll ever change, but I personally have hope in a hopeful future, whatever that actually looks like and
yeah.
means.
Yeah, we change. We don't change, but the inventions change. Our lifestyles change, right? So,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right, man. I've taken too much of your time.
No, it was a great
Fantastic
conversation.
film.
I'm
I
glad I'm glad we got to chat.
wish the ultimate best success. We'll do everything we can to help you out. And thank you for your candor. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me ask you any questions. So I
No, I
appreciate it.
loved it. It was a great conversation. Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
All right.